Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is a game that I had never heard of previously, but has quickly become one of my favorite releases this year, if not my favorite. Personally, I like games in the Souls-like genre quite a lot, and while I'm not a super fan of the Metroidvania genre, I do have some experiences in it with games like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. But the one game that I would liken Whispers of the Witch Tree to the most, in terms of overall style, would be Salt and Sanctuary. It blends the two genres together seamlessly and ends up creating an experience that I genuinely couldn't get enough of throughout my 30 hours of playtime. The game does many things very well, some things it does okay, all of which I'll cover in this review. Now, without spoiling anything, I'll just quickly set up what the game is about. In Whispers of the Witch Tree, you play the role of an Inquisitor, which is basically a custom character of your own, who you create by choosing from a number of different starting classes and a fair amount of cosmetic options to boot. The story takes place in Faeldom, a grim and gritty dark fantasy world where you work as a mercenary in order to confront and fight against chaos. The only issue being that you find yourself intertwined in the middle of everything by chance. The story itself ends up actually being pretty interesting. Throughout your time in the game, you'll find yourself meeting and encountering a number of different characters, each of which of these is fully voiced and well written, making the whole experience from start to finish both engaging and clearly met with a certain level of polish that honestly I was not expecting. The voice acting in general is very well done, which makes the whole experience that much more enjoyable. I went into the game thinking it would be a short 10-hour long game, but I was surprised to see how much the game kept opening up and how much more plot points began being introduced as the game went on. In total, it took me over 30 hours to get through my first go around with the game, and that's not with finishing all the available side quests either. The game even offers up a New Game Plus mode once you finish up your first playthrough, so I think it's fair to say for the price point, you're going to get quite a bit of content with what's there story-wise. Now, let's dive first into gameplay, then I'll talk about the various progression systems as well. The gameplay is pretty straightforward if you've played any Souls-like or honestly really any action RPG. At your disposal is basically a range of attacks that can be something as simple as a light strike combo to heavier attacks. With that, you also have the ability to dodge and block, and that sets up the most fundamental aspects of gameplay. In general, the flow of combat is what you've come to know and expect from these sorts of games. It comes down to reading and memorizing enemy attack patterns, finding your opening, and going in for a hit. The game does have a pretty brutal stamina system where once your bar has been fully depleted, you'll be swinging very slowly without much time to recover. That being said though, the hits do feel fairly chunky and do land with a satisfying thud when swinging your weapon. What sets the game apart is the different abilities that you can use on the fly. If you end up going with a mage or magic user type build, these abilities can come from different schools of magic, with each school having upwards of 9 different abilities at your disposal. So you get a lot of different options to mix and match your loadouts. It's worth noting that you can't just wield all of these different abilities at once. Instead, you'll equip up to 3 different abilities as part of your loadout. Now, depending on your starting class, the abilities you use will obviously often rely on mana, with each ability using up a varying amount of it. As an Inquisitor, you have a loadout, and this loadout is very similar to what you've seen in other Souls-like titles. Essentially, you can equip armor in 5 different slots, with each piece of armor having its own unique weight and poise rating. This system allows you to either have a light or heavy equip load, making it so that you can either roll quickly or not so quickly, spend a lot of stamina when running, or not spend much stamina at all. You can also equip up to 2 different weapons at a time, and in addition to that, you get a number of ring slots and some quick items to use as well. There are a number of different weapon types that you can find in chests, defeating enemies, or by finding blueprints and crafting yourself. These weapon types include daggers, swords, great hammers, and you can also equip an offhand if you're wielding a one-handed only weapon, and these offhands can of course be shields or relics being what's responsible for your magic capabilities. This system obviously applies for a lot of build fluidity, so if you feel like changing on the fly, if you're not interested in using a two-hander anymore, you can switch off to your one hand depending on the situation you're in and utilize magic. It's all really built into what you've come to expect from other Souls-like titles, and honestly, I'm so familiar with it that I enjoyed it quite a bit in this game as well. Now, the game is innately hard because it's a Souls-like, and I'll be honest, it's felt brutal at times and can be very challenging in certain areas. Enemies that hit you pack a punch, leading to significant chunks of your health being taken off. If you're not careful with slowly clearing areas, you'll quickly be killed. This isn't a game where you go from point A to point B pretty quickly. You gotta be slow, you gotta be methodical, and make sure you're clearing out areas before going too far ahead. Now, with that being said, the developers did add some difficulty options through the accessibility menu, allowing you to change how much damage the enemy puts out, how much damage you take, and how much mana your spells use. So you can customize your experience a good amount if you find the initial difficulty too hard. This is always a nice touch in these Souls-like type games. We all know they're usually only one difficulty and either you get it or you don't, but this game at least offers up some options to make your experience the way you want it. So there are a couple of progression systems in the game and I'll go into detail for each of them. To start, you have what is the main system in place. As you gain a certain amount of essence, you'll be able to level up. Each level is going to require more and more essence, and if you die while carrying any unspent essence, you'll have a chance to go back and retrieve it. With that said, each time you do level up in this game, you get what is called a talent point. These talent points get spent in the talent trees, which are these skill trees sprawling with a large variety of nodes to go down. If you've played Diablo or Path of Exile, then some of this might look familiar, but if you haven't, then honestly, it's not as overwhelming as it looks. Essentially, this skill tree allows you to craft your very own unique build, and I really did like the options available here. The game allows you to get creative within a skill tree and even create your own nodes, so to speak. What it ends up consisting of is these smaller and larger nodes, with the smaller ones increasing your current stats like vigor, strength, endurance, and so on, while the larger nodes benefit you by providing some strong passive buffs, and what these end up doing is basically defining your build as a whole. Now, it's worth mentioning that you're not tied to a certain skill tree. At a certain point of the game, you'll be able to start placing talent points in other talent trees, which allows you to multi-class in a sense. You can also reset all your nodes within the hideout, so if you're not satisfied with your current build, you can basically get all your points back and restart fresh. It's all very intuitive, and honestly, I think this build system in general is very well done. The other progression system is your ability upgrade system. Basically, each ability has a number of upgrades that can be acquired for a certain amount of gold. This is a great touch, and some of these upgrades do change how the ability performs quite a bit. For example, my fireball went from a small projectile to a larger one that creates an explosion at its target location. It's pretty cool. Now, outside of the talent tree and abilities, you also have a number of NPCs at your hideout. These NPCs can also be leveled by supplying them with blueprints, with each blueprint adding XP to their overall level. Now, each level the NPC gains grants them new items that they can craft for you. Each NPC does end up having a different use case, whether that be crafting armor, weaponry, runes, or accessories. The system at play here is kind of interesting because what you end up having is features from a survival crafting game embedded into the Souls-like genre. Let me explain. If I want to craft this ring, I'll need to get 2 copper wires and plates. That's great, but this NPC can't craft these materials. So I'll need to head over to the blacksmith to create my 2 copper bars in order to make my copper items at the other NPC. Materials for crafting is often gained by defeating enemies or finding minerals and resources out within the levels themselves. From what I noticed, each time you do rest at a witch tree, the resources in the level do respawn, so you'll always have a place to grab more and more of a certain material. In general, I was never really short on any crafting materials for my next upgrade, but if I ever was, then the game does let me know in which locations on the map I can find them. Honestly, it's going to be pretty interesting how this crafting system will be received by the general audience, but overall, I was pretty indifferent about it. I think it definitely can be streamlined with some quality of life updates. Overall, the progression system was one that I enjoyed quite a bit. I think there's just a lot of different choices to make and a lot of different options to play with. For example, the ability upgrade path that you can go down. The talent tree in general is sprawling with a lot of different options as well. I think what we'll end up seeing is a lot of different builds coming out of this game, and honestly, I'm looking forward to see what people come up with. Now, let's quickly touch on enemy variety. I'm happy to report that there is definitely a good amount of different enemies you'll encounter throughout your time in the game. These enemies can either be ranged or melee focused, but in general, they all have attacks and abilities that separate them from one another. Each biome will have a number of new enemies that will present new challenges and attack patterns that you hadn't previously encountered. This approach helps the game feel fresh, even towards the tail end of the game when you have just about seen everyone and everything. I do, of course, want to mention the bosses. Being a Souls like, it's only right that it has bosses that will make you frustrated when it's your 10th to 20th go around and make you feel like you're on cloud 9 by the time you finish them off. I won't spoil any bosses outside of the first two from early on in the game, but the quality of these bosses throughout the game is very good. The encounters are unique, the strategy you'll apply will vary from one fight to another, and I must say that the difficulty was definitely there. There was one particular boss that took me around 20 attempts, and that's just to say that the game isn't always a walk in the park, to say the least. Now, I'll break this section down into environmental design and the level design, both of which, in my opinion, are pretty good. The environmental design features a ton of environmental storytelling, torn down buildings, dark and decrepit sewers, war-torn countrysides, with a mix of budding taverns, cities, and castles. Each biome has a different aesthetic and a different vibe to it. I was always looking forward to entering a new area that I hadn't been before because I just really want to see what's next. Now, I will also say at times there's this heavy depth of field going on in the background to bring more focus in the foreground, which can definitely dilute the scene quite heavily. I recommend turning off depth of field when playing the game so that way the background looks at least a little bit more clear and not so blurry. Moving on to level design, the game has all your Metroidvania features that you've come to know and either love or hate. Areas are essentially broken down into different sections that are separated by doors, floor openings, and teleporters. The game heavily stresses exploration, finding secret locations, and doing some backtracking as well. As you progress in the game, you'll unlock different traversal abilities to get to areas that were originally unreachable. Now, each area has what is essentially a bonfire that allows you to level up at. These same bonfires serve as fast travel points, and one thing I really liked was being able to move from area to area pretty quickly. I had a suspicion that fast travel would be restricted when carrying essence, or what is essentially your leveling currency, but that's not the case at all. You can freely go from area to area, and that is a great quality of life feature. Now, I want to quickly touch on performance. I played the game on PS5, and the game performed flawlessly. It's worth mentioning that the game doesn't have any graphic options, like you won't be able to choose from frame rate or fidelity mode, but it doesn't really need them anyway since the game just runs at a smooth 60 FPS through and through, which is about what I expect from this type of game. I can't speak on PC performance, but if it's anything like the console experience, then you should be good to go. Alright, let's wrap this review up. Honestly, this game took me by complete surprise in terms of quality and polish. It's a lengthy experience to get through, and the game constantly keeps things fresh by introducing new enemies, items, and new biomes to traverse through. The game does even have a new game plus, which opens up the game in a new way. I walked into Whispers of the Witch Tree not knowing what the game would be about and walked away wanting to spend more time with it. To put it as simply as possible, I highly recommend Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree.